So, welcome back to another episode of Living the Sky Life. I have a very special guest today, a dad. I don't get to talk to fathers very often, and I'm really excited about speaking with Harry Paceris. Is that right? Did I say it
Correct,
right?
exactly. Perfect.
Today. Harry wrote a new book that just launched a few weeks ago. And so we're going to talk a lot about that and also his journey as a father through autism. So, welcome to the podcast, Harry.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I was a early reader of your book. I love it. I have highlights all in it. So, before I kind of get into your book, can you tell the listeners a little bit about your family dynamic and really how autism entered your vocabulary? We all have similar stories, but yours is a little bit unique in that you got to a certain spot in Gus's life, and then you guys kind of regressed a little bit. So, do you want to tell us just a little bit without giving the whole book away?
Yeah, no problem. Again, my name is Harry Paceris. I live 15 minutes from the Pittsburgh airport in McDonald, Pennsylvania. We're a suburb of Pittsburgh, basically. I grew up in a steel town of Weirton, West Virginia, which is about 30 miles from here. And long story short, we were looking for homes in Weirton. A lot of them required a lot of work, so we decided to move up this way. My best friend had recommended we move into our neighborhood. Little did we know how major that move would be. Because shortly after that is, our Gus is my oldest son, and he's kind of the focus of the book. My wife started to notice some developmental delays. It was my first child, so I had nothing to compare him to.
Mm-hmm.
I joke around in the book. If you know me, I'm a type A, over caffeinated, like dynamic type of guy. I joke around that I could have fun at an insurance seminar. So it was hard for me to believe that anything could be wrong with my son. So my wife started throwing around the possibility that he could be on the spectrum. And I said, come on, get out of here. In fact, I was pretty angry. I thought, why are you going to label the kid? It made no sense to me.
And she's a
Um,
nurse, right? So did
and
she
she's a
see it from
nurse.
that perspective, or did she just know mother's intuition, kind of a mixture of both?
I think it was a mixture of both. Mother's
Mm-hmm.
intuition, she was around other children, and she's a nurse. And even then, I hate to say this, I was belligerent. I just found it hard to believe. Then the straw that broke the camel's back, we had back-to-back birthday parties. My cousin Maria, who's a physician in the Weirton area that I just mentioned, her daughter, they had a birthday party. And what we noticed, they gave out like trinkets, and one of them was a pencil and like a pad. And where all the other kids were scribbling and doing other things, Gus just sat and spinned the pencil and was really in his own world. Then Michelle had taken him to a birthday party at a local restaurant in Weirton, and all of the kids were fixated, were all over by the birthday cake, like they should be, and singing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a fan in the corner, and first he was stimming, he was pounding on everything. He did that for a while, and he was fixated on the fan and pretty much forgot that all of his peers and classmates were there. And Miss Josie, who was the preschool teacher, grabbed my wife. She's a hero in the story, and just said, I love you. I love your husband, but I really have a sneaking suspicion he could be on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle came home devastated, broken, but somewhat relieved in that someone, through all the chaos, was able to connect with her and kind of agree with her. And shortly after, we really lucked out, where it was a 6-month wait back then.
Yeah.
We actually, believe it or not, had a family member working at the autism clinic at the Cleveland Clinic Autism Center. So
Mm-hmm.
what are the chances, right? And we were able to get in, and I write about it in the book, but I'll never forget. We had myself, my wife, Gus, and my incredible father, who's known as Papu, my dad, George, who was Gus's best friend, who passed away a year ago. And we received the diagnosis. And on the way home, I was in a fog at first. And I realized a few things. I was wrong. And you have to admit, as a man, you have to admit when you're wrong. Two, I owed my wife an apology. And three, I thought about it. I'm a martial artist. I boxed, and I got in that hyper adrenalized state where I felt like you're in the ring. And I said, that's it. When I go home, the second I get home, from day one, I'm going to start helping my son and improving my son and helping my wife on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the story. And I will tell you, that day when I got back, I ran out to Barnes and Noble. I bought almost every single book I could buy on autism. If I turned my iPad around, you'd be staring at upwards of 300 books in my library. Um, and the first book I ever read was Temple Grandin,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that I'm one of the speakers with her for the Autism Parenting Magazine International Summit, um, starts in May, was beyond thrilling to me. To
Yeah.
see my picture a few away from hers was incredible, because when we started, hers was the first book I ever grabbed. So,
Yeah.
it's let me say this about the book. It's intentionally not War and Peace. This, and I'll explain where the book came from, but I had fathers like myself in mind that might be grappling with the diagnosis. And I thought, if I wrote Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, they're grabbing it, throwing it away, not gonna read it. This is an intentional 1 to 2 day read.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be very easy and palpable for them to grab and go, okay, maybe my wife is right. Let me look at this coming from a dad's perspective, and maybe convince them that they need to go all in and help their child.
Mm-hmm. Have you encountered a lot of dads like throughout your journey? Because Gus is he 20,
Right
19?
now he's 20,
Okay.
and I'm very active. I was previously on the board of directors for Autism Speaks. I'm on the board here for the Autism Caring Center.
Mm-hmm.
I founded one of the founding families of North Fayette P.A.L.S here in the
Mm-hmm.
area, which stands for Providing Acceptance, Love, and Support. It's an
Yeah,
organization for
pals.
special needs
Yeah.
children.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I spoke I'll give you the origin story. So in 2014, this is where the idea came. I was asked to speak for the Autism Notebook here in Greentree, up in the area. Actually, Mark Cuban grew up in that area, and when I was allotted 15 minutes. Another speaker was allotted 15. The gentleman got up and, quite frankly, melted. Some people just in front of crowds just don't do well, and we had a room with about 100 people, maybe. So they look at me and they go, "Can you riff for 20 minutes?" I go, "I'm on it. I have this." Well, as I was speaking, multiple mothers start lining up. It was I think we had at least 12 moms line up. My first thought was, Paceris, did you offend someone? I thought, did I say something to offend them? Then I realized they were all kind of emotional. And when I walked down off the stage, they had cell phone numbers in hand and went, "You need to talk to our husbands. They're not on board. They're not accepting." And I will tell you, I'm bold. I could care less. I called all of them. Two hung up on me. I had multiple cups of coffee. I had a few conversations, and I had one dinner. And what I found was a mix. Like, some I had to convince, and they eventually they were on board. A few were on board, but when you receive the diagnosis, it's so weighty. I say to people, if your child falls off their bike and they scrape their knee, what do? You clean it, put Band-Aid on, you're done. This is far larger than that. So they were very stoic and very quiet, because men want to fix things. It's in our DNA. So where the wives thought they weren't on board, I think they were, but it was just a matter of getting to the point of action. They were just they're overwhelmed with what they were experiencing. So at that point, I said, I think there's a book here, but I held off. 2 years ago, I spoke to the Autism Caring Center's Mother's Day conference with about 400 mothers. And I was writing the speech, and I said, my speech is my book. So this is my book on steroids. Excuse me, my speech on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
I decided, and I received the same feedback at that time. This is going to help me speak to my husband. He's partially there, but not all the way there. So I had that demographic in mind when I was writing this book. I wanted not just help people, but I wanted a book that would really hit home with fathers,
Mm-hmm.
and on top of that, I didn't want it to be soft. I come from a martial arts background. I bring a lot of Tung Sudo philosophy into the book,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted that warrior mentality, whether you're a mom or a father reading it.
Yeah, you definitely have a lot of sports analogies, so it's not like it's a warm and touchy-feely book like maybe the moms would write or appreciate. But as a mom, it's not just for dads. And for those that are listening and not watching this on YouTube, the book is called From Struggle to Strength A Father's Journey with Autism and the Power of Hope and Positivity. It's really a book for everyone, but it is geared towards fathers and trying to get the fathers who, like you've said, are maybe a little hesitant to jump in. I would think too that it's not all dads who are like resistant to accepting the diagnosis. I would say that there's probably several that I've met, moms and dads really, who don't know what to do. They just kind of like freeze, and then it stays in that period of like just complete shock for a year or two. And people are saying, you probably should do earlier intervention. You should probably do these things. And they just don't know where to start. So, and back when Gus was diagnosed and my son Skylar, because they're close in age, there really wasn't social media presence, and many books aside from Temples and things like you said, like direct stories from parents who have varying kids on, varying levels of the spectrum. So, it was nice for me to read Gus's story because he is literally the opposite end of Skylar. So, to hear about his future and how he went through school and is in college or looking in college now and all of that. I love success stories of families because ours is success in a different way. So,
Right. No, I
yeah, I
completely,
really appreciated that.
and anyone listening to this, what I decided to do there, and to your point, it is a massive spectrum. So my 20-year-old would look completely different than a 20-year-old that might be severe. But what I wanted to do, there's no prescriptive how to. I don't think it's fair to even write one of those.
Right.
But what I did want to do is talk about his story and talk about the mental construct. The reason, one of the biggest compliments I received actually within the last week, I had a book influencer get a hold of me and go, you know what? I read your book and it's kind of a motivational book too. And I'm like, that was the intent, was I wanted to talk about the mental construct it takes to succeed, regardless of where your child's at on the spectrum. And I had one of my clients get a hold of me, and their office manager said to me, we read your book and we're stopping all complaints. It's just a no complaint zone. And if someone does that, they're putting $1 in. They're like, we're gonna enter each day with positivity, because that's what I talk about. So that was kind of the purpose was, and that's what I'm about. I don't do negative. My parents haven't raised my brother, and I like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, my brother is both a national and international philanthropist that has made a massive impact on the world, and that's what we're about. We're about helping people and really trying to remain positive.
Yeah, I think as far as Josh and my mantra, my husband, like our whole thing lately, we always just say perspective, because there are so many things we could complain about during a day, like speeding or someone cutting us off or whatever, those little things. And then we come home and we've got Skylar's maybe smacking us or throwing food or whatever. I just feel like the more I put things in perspective, and it changes my mood and makes me present myself better for him, and then his mood changes. Even if he is slapping me, if I start laughing and making him laugh, he immediately retreats and he stops, kind of agitation that he's got or behaviors. So one of the chapters in your book, chapter 5, I really resonated with. It's called Do Not Forget to Smile. And you talk a lot about the positivity and about just the power of a smile just to yourself when you're having a meltdown. Can you kind of like paraphrase some of that chapter? Again, not to give it all away.
Absolutely. It's basically a chapter on, and I could go off. I am, so again, I come from the Bruce Lee background. I am adamant about strong body, strong mind. And I'm adamant that you pass this on to your children. But I do talk about, you do go through extraordinarily stressful days. We've been there with the rigidities, the meltdowns, just like anyone else. I talk about ways to quickly dissipate stress. And one of which people don't realize is simply smiling. Smiling, it's amazing, because what it does, it activates neuropeptides in the brain, and it actually becomes a de-stressor. I mean, we're involving dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. So with dopamine, we're talking pleasure, motivation. With endorphins, the relief of pain, and with serotonin, it's like an antidepressant. So believe it or not, there's actually science behind a smile. So what I talk about is, even if the day's going crazy, go into a room, sit. I always think about the mantra, this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
And just smile. Even if you have to watch something like a YouTube video or something to make you laugh, that smile activates so much neurologically that it just calms you down. The other thing I talk about in the chapter is box breathing. I do. I'm obsessive when it comes to deep breathing, and I think it's great in terms of de-stressing the body. But on top of that, in the chapter, what I talk about is movement and eating clean. And I'm adamant about this. You have to set the example for your child. So when you're entering the day, in particular, we're past that, but the days of the therapist coming in and out of the house, those are long days, going feeding therapy, you name it. I mean, it's we've been there. You need to take time to eat healthy, and the cleaner you're eating, the cleaner your child's going to eat. You're setting the example, and then on top of that, you need to have the energy level to truly and effectively work with the therapist, work with your child, even handle the day to optimize the day. So if you're eating fast food, junk, processed foods, loads of sugar, physically you're drained, mentally you're drained, and you're really not there for your child. So I am adamant about just really cleaning up the food in the house, having everyone eat healthy. The child's going to benefit greatly neurologically from a cleaner diet. I mean, when you think about your average autistic child, if you throw in food dyes, if you throw in sugar, if you throw in gluten, casein, and it fits into a glutamorphin, casomorphin receptor site, you gave them an opioid, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They go from their A game to their C game. Even my youngest son, Max, who's going to be playing football next year at Allegheny College here in Meadville, Pennsylvania, close by. Max, when he was young, has an ADHD component. We thought he might even have some traits of autism. If Max consumed any red 4O, red dye, he would rage out of control. So the cleaner the diet, the better for the child. And I actually have a second book in mind. It's probably all going to be about wellness. And I think it's that important.
Yeah.
And rates of obesity now have skyrocketed with children on the spectrum because I think parents are exhausted. So they just pluck them down in front of like an Xbox or something, and they're there quite a bit. And even if they can't participate in a sport, they can go for a walk, they could go for a run. You could take them on a hike. There's other things that they can do, even a bike ride if possible. You can get them on that'll help them and get them some vitamin D, and they're going to benefit from that.
One of the things that just in the 5 years of doing the podcast and just all the speaking events and things and meeting so many families online and everywhere else, I get a lot of feedback and understanding that parents don't have the time. I mean, they don't even have 5 minutes, especially single parents, whether it's a single dad or a single mom. And that's the hardest part. Like for me, I at least have Josh we sit down and we balance calendars every Sunday. And if I know he has to be out of town for work or whatever, then I kind of reschedule my walking the dog or riding the Peloton or whatever it is. And on weekends, he runs with his running group every Saturday morning. I always know he's going to do that. And then he makes time for me. We schedule our workouts in because like you, that's the only way I can de-stress is physical activity and doing that. But for the people who have always said, I don't even have 5 minutes. I'd have to get up at 4 a.m, but my kid doesn't sleep. So they're up too. And I just never get alone time for even 5 minutes to do anything. Like, do you have any suggestions for them? I mean, if it's just deep breathing before they lay their head down on the pillow, just to take 5 seconds to deep breathe, or is there anything small and short that they can do from an exercise perspective?
First of all, I completely empathize with that. We went through a period like that. You just mentioned the first thing I would recommend is I am very big on planning. I have a planner every day. I could tell you like from AM to PM what I'm going to do. A lot of it, if you can, it all depends too. I will tell you, if we were lucky where my parents were like incredible. They were here constantly. She always had some. So if you have one person that could babysit, and what and I come from the David Goggins perspective. Just you got to do it. I would say it doesn't have to be like a thorough 1 hour workout, but you still need a de-stressor. 15 minutes in the day, if you could just fit it in, whether you have, and if there's even no one watching your children, there's a time where they're preoccupied or they're down or maybe watching TV. To your point, can I go in and meditate for 15 minutes? Can I do deep breathing for 15 minutes? Can I, if I do have the time, can I go for a brief walk just to get some vitamin D? I think if you plan it into your day,
Mm-hmm.
and your children almost pick up on it too, like it's going to be part of your schedule. It really helps. And to your point too, even if it's done at the end of the day, if it's done early in the day, I know what I would do. And when I would come home from work, my wife would be with therapists all day. I would tell her, get out of here, go for a half hour, go do yoga, go, whether it's here or elsewhere, go do something. And then we would sometimes do a trade-off. I would quickly run to the gym, or I would do something here at the house. The other thing too, and I'm going to write about this when I write my second book, there's so many options at home. You mentioned, like, I own a Peloton.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Peloton. I have an X3 bar system. I have what's called the Harambee system, which is, it's the most state-of-the-art band workout you could do. It's not cheap, but you could get it done in 15 minutes and work your entire body. So there are a lot of hacks that are out there now too, where you can get a quick full body workout. And I have to tell you, I start every day with swinging a kettlebell. Just doing a kettlebell swing works the entire body. And I try to do 100 in the morning very quick. And it takes 15 minutes. So there are hacks that you can do, but I think it's absolutely optimal to give yourself a de-stressor. And it doesn't have to be, by the way, a workout. Again, it could be meditating. It could
Mm-hmm.
be something quickly. But I think it's so important that you go into the day mentally healthy and just de-stress.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice too if, depending on the level of severity of autism that your child presents, it might be something too if they kind of pick up on, well, this is mommy's like deep breathing time, or dad's or whatever, and
Right.
if they can practice. I mean, I know we've worked with Skylar over the years at sitting still for 10 seconds literally is like the best we could get, and now it's like up to a minute or 2 minutes. But even if your child could participate with you, even if it's just a little bit and sit next to you, you're not alone, but you're teaching them, that de-stressing or just having some quiet time is okay. And it's essential. Maybe they'll, you know, be involved too.
And if I could throw in too, if you have any local groups, like when we started PALS, the beauty of PALS, it brought families together going through similar situations. And some of the kids had Downs, but a lot of them had autism. When all those kids are playing together, we had some parents that would walk or jog or do
Mhm.
something like that, kind of take advantage of that time. And what I would definitely say, any parent listening to this, 1 in 36 children right now are being diagnosed.
Mhm.
If you don't have an organization like that in your area, I mention this in the book, start one. Um, one one major point at the end of the book, I talk about my book. So this is Greek Easter. This is our Easter week. I talk about the Greek word philotimo. Philotimo means good for the sake of doing good and asking nothing in return. You know that what you're doing might have a ripple effect in the universe. So writing this book was an act of philotimo. So what I say all the time, I use that concept to say, go and make an impact. I lecture to my sons. They say, don't in life, don't sit on the bench, play in the game. The people that play in the game make a difference in life. What I would encourage anyone listening to this is, if you don't have an organization in your area, I can almost guarantee you're surrounded by a lot of families with children on the spectrum that
Mhm.
would love that collective village. Make one, start one. And if you're looking for time, when those kids start making some bonds or get used to seeing each other, maybe that's your time. You could go for a walk or do whatever. But I would encourage anyone listening to this to try to find or build an organization in their area.
Well, I agree. And I think it's funny because, we've lived here over 20 years, and I'm still meeting families or being, sent information on families like, hey, could you talk to this family? There are so many people living around me with children on the spectrum, and it's blowing my mind because I had no idea. And some of them have children the same age as Skylar, which is an adult now. And we've never connected all these years, and there's never been any support groups here in town. And people keep saying, I just wish there was a place for us to go. And like physically, virtually, I have tons of support groups and things, but it would have been nice to have people local, that to like, bounce things off of and stuff. So I agree with you. I think it should be started. Most things get started with a couple parents just coming together and going, let's just have a meeting and see who can come. And then we just kind of keep going from there. We always
That's
develop
how
and
we
build
started
everything.
it. It was on our township Facebook site. We put out, hey, are there other parents out there? It was like Lord of the Rings, the first movie when they were all together at the table. We had, and I mentioned all the names in my book. I mean, we all came together, and all of them have become family to us, quite frankly. And then to extend that further, Kelly Kane, who founded the Autism Caring Center here locally, she brought me onto the board of directors, and I'm proud to say the Caring Center here in Pittsburgh's helped well over 1,000 families to date. So, we're trying to reach out and make a difference, and we're finding now there's just more and more newly diagnosed children left and right in the area. So, these organizations are good in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely encourage someone that if they haven't started one, try to get one going in your area.
Yeah. Well, you referenced early on, like, kind of the motivation behind writing this book. What would be, if there was just one takeaway that you would hope that parents, perhaps fathers specifically, since that's kind of who you geared it towards, like what their takeaway would be from reading your book? What is the one thing that you hope that people walk away maybe knowing differently or doing differently?
Sure. I mean, I would say, we live in a society, and I see it all the time, where people almost want to compare their children. Well, Johnny is doing this and
Oh, yeah.
Bobby's doing this. And my main takeaway to give to you, on top of the four elements of my book, which are positivity, resilience, grit, and hope. Um, God gave you your child for a reason. I'm not, it's this, I don't spout, religion left and right in my book, but I have the deep faith, and I believe that God doesn't make a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
and that you were chosen. And forget what your neighbors are doing, forget about anyone else. You have been handed a child that needs some additional help, and you were chosen for a reason, and it's a blessing. So don't worry about what Bobby or Sally or anyone else in the area is doing, and truly focus on making your child, regardless of where they're at on the spectrum, the best human being they could be, the best version of themselves. And that's why I go and I talk about concepts like the Finnish concept of sisu, which is like resilience on steroids. I talk about the 2% rule, which is the mind of a black belt, improving a child on a daily, kind of going in with that positive attitude and going, today we're doing this, today we're going to do this, and just really uh, incremental wins daily that lead to some bigger things later down the road. So my main take, though, is just that your child was given to you for a reason, and they're a blessing. I'll tell you this right now. So my son Gus, he's on the spectrum. He has no hearing in his right ear.
Mm-hmm.
He has no right ear advantage. You and I have it. He doesn't. He has Tourette syndrome, and he has primary ciliary dyskinesia, which is a breathing issue. The only positive to the breathing issue is he has to work out. It's important that he and my youngest son has it as well. But if God came down today and said, I could pluck one thing away, what do you want? It wouldn't be autism. I love exactly who he is as a human
Mm-hmm.
being. I would give him his hearing back, quite frankly. I always feel bad because he has to lean on one side sometimes in a large crowd. So I love who he is. I wouldn't change who he is. I would encourage anyone listening to this to understand that your child's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't change them. Just work with them every day to help improve them. And there's so many new modalities out there. The one beauty of this book for me is I'm back diving into every book I can. I'm almost reinvesting myself in. It's awesome to me to see how far things have gone from when we were helping him,
Mm-hmm.
to go through. And I'm a big advocate for brain balance. It helped my son, neuroplasticity, rewiring of the brain. It's the only modality I kind of touch upon on the book. And I'm right now jumping into multiple books on neuroplasticity right now, because I don't think I'm done. I'd like to get more help for my son here down the line when he comes home for the summer.
Yeah. Well, I guess that leads me to my last question about just you as a parent. One of the things that people ask me all the time, I have a neurotypical daughter who's in college. She's the younger sibling, and then Skylar, of course. And the bulk of my parenting journey has been, and still is, two different people. I have to be a certain parent and mother to Skylar. And then Kendall requires a totally different version of me, not less than, but she just needs, a different type of attention and different version of me. So having Max and Gus, have you what have you learned about yourself as a parent, and as a person really from raising two completely unique, all of our kids are unique, but just completely different journeys of parenthood. And have you had to kind of divide yourself into two different people when you're dealing with Max and Gus?
I love this. This is an awesome question. So the beauty of my boys, you have Gus, who is the most infinitely happy, positive. Gus is incapable of a bad thought. I'm not exaggerating. So he's my happy hippie. And I tell people all this time. So he's marching down the steps, right? Every morning, it's not hi, dad. It's hi, dad. He's just boom.
Every day is their best day. I love
Every
that
day's their
too.
best day.
Yeah.
Max is awesome. So I am arguably one of the top sports influencers, University of Pittsburgh. I just did some stuff for the draft too for the Steelers. So I'm in the sports world. Max is a tough, edgy, but compassionate because of his brother, football player who, like I said, he'll be an Allegheny Gator next year, playing in college. And you want to talk about two differing personalities, but the two support each other. But what it's really taught me more than anything, one is patience.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're raising any child on that, it's yes, I'm type A, and yes, I'm over caffeinated, as you could tell, but it's really taught me to sit back and to be very, very patient. Then the other, you mentioned earlier, a word I use every day, and that's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's given me better perspective on life. I talk about it in the book when we had to take Gus to the Pittsburgh Children's Institute, and we were walking through the different departments. And God bless this parent. So here's my son holding my hand, and at least he's talking to me. There's children in wheelchairs, children in breathing apparatuses. It was like God's way of saying, you know what, Viserys, just be quiet.
Yeah.
And those parents have a lot to deal with. My son's walking in with me, he's smiling, he could hug me. It's given me greater gratitude and perspective. I'll say, I guess the best way to put it, and we mentioned it earlier, is appropriate focus. I don't particularly care, like we grew up in a neighborhood with jocks. I mean, my youngest son's a jock, but my son's peers, we have one that just signed a professional soccer contract, two that are starting at Duquesne University for soccer. We've had a baseball player go on to play in college, but he was part of that mix. But I instead of being, oh my God, that could have been him, I never worried about it. He was their friend. My job was making him the best human being that he could be. It's really taught me appropriate focus, perspective, and patience. And it's made me a far, far better human being. And I think the final piece is empathy. I think if you have a child on the spectrum or you have a special needs child, by default, you become more empathetic to anything. So it's been a blessing. I'm a better human being for the experience that my wife and I have gone through with my son. That's all I could say.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think, if there's any blessings to take, because people get bent out of shape, and I understand when we say we're blessed, this child is a blessing. Of course, Skylar's a blessing. Any child is a blessing. But I think the one positive to take away is the siblings are superheroes. Like the amount that they go through from the aggression and the behaviors, if that's something that you experience in your life, they have to tolerate all of that. They have to navigate friendships, and whether they explain their siblings, disability or not, or how to do all of that and navigate friendships. And then, for Kendall to go off to college and her brother doesn't get those experiences, to be happy for herself and proud of herself and live her own life and not feel bad that she's leaving him behind. The empathy that our kids develop, both sets. I mean, I feel like Skylar was born with empathy, like Gus. He smiles every morning. Like that's my favorite part of the day, is going in to wake him up, because he pops up out of bed and he's just like, hey,
Yeah.
The day is the exact same as it was yesterday. His same routine, he goes to the same places and all of that, but it's the best day of his life because it's a new day. So just that part of it. I think that Max probably already was going to be empathetic being raised by you and Michelle, but just to live life next to his brother, I'm sure he is the biggest protector of Gus too, and they are like
Oh,
thieves.
I write about what in the chapter in my book says find your Max, and
Mhm.
it's the importance of siblings. And Max was the overseer. He would check out, make sure Gus was posting the right stuff on social media. Max, I joke around, I said he has the when he dresses, it's somewhere between Elton John and a pimp. I mean, Max was always swagged out. So if Gus came down with like something that was ill fated or wasn't matching, you'd hear him argue, be like, bro, I got to help you here. Change up. He's always looked out for him. But I will tell you, when Gus graduated, we have a tradition here where you write notes to the graduate. In
Mhm.
fact, we need to do that now for my son. Max is going to graduate. And everybody was turning in these beautiful letters. So I had to remind him 3 times, my son, that's Max. I go up and write the damn thing. He comes down 15 minutes later, slams it down, walks out. I thought, oh, this is going to be terrible. And I'm reading it.
Yeah,
And
it was sweet.
I was so choked up. I couldn't. And my wife, it took her, I think, 3 attempts to get through, but it showed you the love, respect, and appreciation. Because I finally got him to open up about it. He said, Dad, everybody loves Gus. Like when
Mhm.
you're friendly, it's taught, he goes, it's taught me something. When you're kind, you're friendly to everyone, and you have such a positive outlook, everyone loves you. So I think, I don't know if it wasn't for I think Max would be a different human being, totally, if it wasn't for his brother.
Yeah.
Like on the field, he wants to hit somebody hard. But I mean, he's a far more balanced human being.
Mhm.
And I like I said, the relationship they have is amazing. What he's done to help us is amazing. And they really, really root for each other. So
Yeah.
it's very special. I love the dynamic, and I'm honored to have to be the father of the two of them. It's great.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's lacking in the market is books from siblings. So I would love, Max to write a book. I would love for my daughter's a beautiful writer. I would love for her when she ever gets to that place. She still doesn't really like talking much about just her experience growing up with Skylar. She's only almost 19. So I would love for her to write her story because there just really isn't. I mean, just as a parent, I can only assume what she's kind of gotten out of it and what she's struggled with. But she's been on the podcast a couple times and shared a little bit of stuff, but I would love to see some more sibling books because it would really be
That's a great
eye-opening for
idea.
all of us.
Absolutely. I think it'd be a great idea.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Harry, thank you so much. Again, your book is called From Struggle to Strength. It's available on Amazon. Anywhere else that I'll link up your
So
Amazon.
it's just look for the gold boxing gloves,
Uh-huh.
and it's actually, I'm really honored. We have over I think we're up to 55 4-star reviews right
Nice.
now. And it's I'm going to be recording the Audible here very soon.
That's fun. I
So
love doing that.
it'll be right now Amazon and Kindle, and we're working on the Audible. I'm looking forward to that because what I want to really honestly do is riff a little bit.
Yeah,
I do a lot of podcasts. I've done radio. I've done TV. So I'm used to talking, and I'd like to be able to add more context in the Audible book, make it special.
yeah.
So, but right now, if you go to Amazon and put in From Struggle to Strength, Harry Paceris, it pops right up.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you need to get into the field and to work. You and my husband work for the same company, so
Same company. Yes, yes.
so anyway, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.